All right. So, hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. Um, I want to thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to come and listen to these three incredible authors read from their new releases. So, my name is Hayla Alawi, and on behalf of Atmosphere Press, I am thrilled to introduce you to today's middle grade fiction event with Marc Douglas Smith reading from Tamarac Summers, which released this past August, Sonia Meyers reading from We Have Something to Say, which released October 10th, and Kellye Abernathy reading from the Aquamarine Surfboard, which released just a few days ago, actually, on January 5th. So all three authors' books can be purchased through your local bookstores or online from various retailers, including Atmosphere Press's website. So I'm going to share those links in the chat right now. So when you get a chance, you can check out those links. I'll be posting those later too, so you can check them out as our authors are reading. So at the end of this event, we will also have time for your questions. So throughout the event, if you have a question for our poets, you can go ahead and type it in the chat, and we will, of course, make sure it gets asked. During the reading, please keep yourselves muted to keep extraneous sound at a minimum. But in the meantime, you can feel free to use the chat for, praise and comments and anything else you want to share while our authors are reading. As you may have experienced over the last year of virtual events, technical issues can happen. If they do, we will do our best to resolve them as quickly as possible. So thank you in advance for your patience with that. And one last note, we here at Atmosphere Press appreciate your support today and of course always. And if you have a manuscript of your own, we'd love to read it. So feel free to submit your work to books@atmospherepress.com. Again, thank you so much for tuning in and supporting Marc, Sonia, and Kellye this afternoon. Let's get to it. It gives me great pleasure to introduce our first reader, Marc Douglas Smith. From the time he was an infant, Marc has spent part of each summer in the Adirondack Mountains in northern New York. The Adirondacks are the setting for Tamarac Summers, as well as many of his poems, which have appeared in The Fourth River, Snowy Egret, Green Fuse, Blue Line, and other journals. He is a retired English professor who received his doctorate from State University at Buffalo. In retirement, he continues to teach courses in 19th century American literature in the Osher program at Dartmouth College. He lives in New Hampshire with his wife, Betsy, a watercolor artist, and also who collaborated with Atmosphere on the cover for Tamarac Summers. And it's a beautiful cover, so definitely check it out. Marc, take it away. Let's see. Marc, I think you might be muted still.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah, there we are.
Yes,
Okay.
there you go.
Tamarac Summers is about a boy adopted by older parents who came out of whose early life was spent in a boys' home. He's brought up to the Adirondack camp that is owned by this couple, which is really old enough to be his grandparents. He has a lot of traumas in his life. Certainly being an orphan was one trauma. There are also some scars that appear on his body, and the people who adopted him don't know exactly what the origin of those scars are, but we find out about that as the story goes on. There is some humor in the book, but it doesn't show up in these two chapters. So whatever, this sounds kind of somber. So there is a fairly long prologue of the book, and then this is chapter 1, so I'll start here. Martin was just a boy in those days long ago. He had some magic about him, but only the wild creatures who watched from a distance knew for sure. They could see it in his walk and the way he paused and listened. They saw it in the way his straw-colored hair swirled wildly around his head. To the watching deer, the birds, and the bears around the lake, he was a quick, wild pony of a boy. Three Tamaracks was a slender, wooded point of land that reached out into like a long, crooked finger into the cold waters of Arenda Lake. The camp was named after the tamarack pine trees that grew near the cottage. The cottage had bark on the outside logs, a stone chimney that let out smoke day and night, and two covered porches, one up and one down, with a view of the lake. Surrounding the camp were the very old mountains found in the Adirondacks in the north of New York State. They say that magical things can happen around old mountain ranges, especially for children and old folks who still had dreams about wild animals and the gnarly faces peering out of the oldest tree trunks. The three tamarack pine trees, not too far from the large round rocks at the end of the point, were green in the warm months of late spring and summer. Their needles turned gold in the fall when cold winds swept out of the west and moved over the chilly waters of the lake. Martin was now just going on 10 years old. He was adopted when he was 7 by two kindly people. They were much older than the parents of his friends back home. His new father's name was Cyrus. When Martin was first adopted, he had a real problem pronouncing Cyrus's name, so he called him Cider and eventually Papa Cider. The name stuck. Papa Cider was tall, lean, long-limbed, and had wispy silver hair that never wanted to stay in place. He had thick eyebrows and wore rimless glasses. When he smoked his pipe, which was very often, he had a thoughtful, distracted look. He was always kind to Martin, and if Martin did something wrong, Papa Cider had a way of turning to his wife, Nani. Nani could be a little sterner with Martin, who was a jumpy, energetic boy. Nani was a short and sturdy woman in contrast to Cider, who was tall and stringy thin. She had flushed apple cheeks and always seemed to have a barely contained delight over the fact that Martin had come into their lives. She laughed a lot and wore straw bonnets on hot days. She sang to herself, and it seemed that every morning she would come up to Martin, touch his sun-bleached hair, look into his water-green eyes and say, "What a blessing you are, my boy." When she said this, sometimes Martin could see tears in her steady, dark blue eyes. Sometimes when he lay in bed at night in the cabin, Martin could hear the loons on the lake calling to each other in piercing, trilling voices from long distances. He felt lonely then, and he often remembered Father Horrigan's home for boys where he lived as an orphan. On some nights when he lived alone there, he could hear the owls hooting in the far-off woods in the dark hours. It was a pretty lonely sound. But Martin knew now he had found his home when he listened to Nani and Papa Cider in the other room, saying goodnight to each other as they prepared for sleep amidst the smells of dark, damp balsam needles and the last smoke of the fireplace. A favorite time for Martin was at sundown when he would sit on the balcony porch of the cottage and watch the deep shadow rise higher and higher on Patchen Mountain at the north side of the lake. Pretty soon, only the stony top of the mountain caught the sunlight, and it looked like a last hot flame in the dark sky as nightfall arrived. Martin would usually sit on Papa Cider's knee as they took in the sights of the lake from the second floor balcony porch. On cloudless nights, they could see the stars reflected in the lake still waters. Fish or snapping turtles would nose up to the surface and circles would form in the water. Occasionally a fish would jump and all the stars in the sky would tremble for a few seconds. Martin, beginning to feel sleep coming on, would do his best to follow Papa Cider's hand that would sweep across the sky. He softly called out the names of constellations. Martin liked the sound of the names, especially Aquila and Ursa. Eventually he would fall asleep. Papa Cider, looking down at the face of the sleeping boy, would say, "Oh, it might be bedtime for Martin." Yep, even the big bear in the sky is getting sleepy now. With that, Martin felt himself swept into Cider's arms, down a stairway, and his weightless dreaming was about to begin as he was lowered onto the bed. After that, Papa Cider might walk out into the living room and drop a last log on the fire. Then there was a sudden burst of firelight on the wall of Martin's bedroom, and he'd open his eyes for a second and look at the pine knots in the wall. Each one looked like the dark, alert eyes of a deer, or sometimes a moose, or a bear, or other creature that he might have seen in the woods that day. When the firelight grew low, Martin could no longer see the knotty eyes, but he believed they were still watching over him in the dark. It's the end of that chapter. And I'll quickly move to chapter 5. Chapter 5 here follows a trip that Nani and Papa Cider and Martin took down to what they call the Big Marsh, which is a big marshy area at the end of the lake. And Martin saw a small baby turtle there that he thought they should bring home with him. And he really thought that this turtle had been abandoned, but he was told that no, they were in the right place and that we shouldn't do that. So as this opens up, there are two things happening in this chapter. First of all, Nani comes into Martin's room after this long day that they've had. He is very concerned and thinking about that turtle they left behind. She wants to, for the first time, ask him about the scars that appear on his arm and his chest. And the answer he gives to her has to do with how some children deal with trauma when they can't quite name the event, but imaginatively their mind works on it. It was 10:30, a little past Martin's usual summer bedtime. Nani, looking thoughtful, sat at the edge of the bed. Some great day, wasn't it, Martin? Martin nodded. Nani reached out and lifted Martin's chin and took a long look at him. Oh, you took a lot of sun on your face today. Do you feel all right? Martin didn't hear the question. He had other things on his mind. Nani, could we go down to the Big Marsh again tomorrow? Tomorrow, Nani answered, a little surprised. Martin, that's a long paddle to do 2 days in a row. She paused and thought for a second. You're still thinking about that little turtle, aren't you? Yep, Martin said, his head dropping. She's all alone out there, and it's dark and cold in the Big Marsh at night. Well, Nani said, maybe we'll go down there again this weekend. This weekend? Maybe sooner. Now settle back onto your pillow, Nani said, placing a second pillow under Martin's head. Because I have something to ask you right now. Nani slowly reached over and touched Martin's scarred left arm and hand. These scars, Martin, you never told us where you got them. You want to tell me now? You don't have to. I'm just asking. Martin was quiet for a few minutes. He pulled the covers up higher around him. Finally, he spoke. Well, I was just a little kid, Nani, so I don't remember much. Just that I was running and it was all dark around me, but I couldn't see much. And then what, Martin? Nani squeezed his hand gently. And then something lifted me way off the ground. And I turned around to see what it was. And you wouldn't believe it, Nani, but what it was, you wouldn't believe it, but go on, Martin. It was a giant dark bird, tall, why even taller than Papa Cider. It was almost all black with real big wings. It had a big crest on its head. Nani steadied herself. And did the bird give you these scars? Oh no, Nani. I was trying to get somewhere in a hurry, but the big dark bird was trying to save me from something. It folded its wings around me, and the next thing I knew, the bird carried me away. It was trying to save you? From what, Martin? I can't remember. A tear rolled down his cheek and he quickly wiped it away. Nani, could we talk about something else? Nani moved closer and put her arms around Martin. Of course we can talk about something else. I won't ever ask you about the scars again. I promise, okay? It's just that I get scared, Nani. Scared I might be left alone. Oh no, Martin. We're here to stay. But what do you do when you get scared? Well, I guess I turn to the wild animals. Like Papa told me, you just have to look around and listen to what's up here in the mountains. Even in my dreams, the deers and bears and little critters gather around me. It's like they want to protect me. Why would they want to do that? She said, that's easy. It's because you're a lover of a wild little boy. Maybe they can see all that. But right now, let's talk about something you can take into your dreams tonight. A story, Martin asked, lighting up at the idea. Sort of a story. Just listen now. There's a place called Glacier Pond. Has Papa Cider told you about it? Only about how dangerous it is getting there. Papa Cider told me that. Well, let me explain it to you, Nani said, clearing her voice. At the far end of the lake, there's a creek, but you can't see it because a lot of big willows have branches hanging low over the water there. If you paddle up to it, it turns into a creek with rapid waters and lots of twists and turns. That's why Cyrus says it's dangerous. Let's give it a try, Martin said. Nani sounded stern. Now calm down and just listen. That creek begins at Glacier Pond, and they say that on some days you can see the piebald deer on the shores of the pond. Martin looked at Nani. At night, she let her hair down. The dark red in her hair was streaked with silver, but in the amber light cast by the bedside lamp, her hair had a golden tint to it. Her dark blue eyes looked deeper than ever, and to Martin at this moment, she seemed like a magical sorceress, telling him some amazing secret that they would share. How do you say it, Nani, the name of the deer? Piebald, she said slowly. It's the rarest deer in the wild, rarer than the white deer. It's white or very light tan over much of its coat, but with dark or white spots and large swaths of broad stripes and many shades of brown and black. Looks like the stripes were swept across the deer's coat by a big paintbrush. The few that have caught sight of the piebald at Glacier Pond say he's the biggest deer they've ever seen, almost the size of a moose. I think I've seen it, Martin said, almost in awe at what he was about to say. I've seen it in my dreams. Yep, looks like he's painted by a giant brush. I wonder who holds the brush. Nani looked not at all surprised at what Martin was saying. She kissed him on the top of the head and then rose up. For a moment in her dark blue robe with a silky glimmer shining in the amber light of the room, Martin thought she was about to levitate and turn in the air, but he was sure this was just his imagination. So think about the piebald deer tonight, Martin. Nani headed for the doorway and then turned around the last time. Maybe someday you'll see him up close, and that might just be good luck for you. It's good to think about beautiful things when you're ready to sleep. Martin heard her footsteps go down the stairs. What other magical things did Nani know, but not speak about? He thought for a second about the piebald deer. Then he thought about the enormous bird that one day swept down and lifted him from danger. But soon enough, he was thinking about less graceful creatures, the ones that move slowly along the earth and carry heavy shells on their back. They too were beautiful and majestic in their own way. Where was that little turtle, his turtle, tonight? Thank you.
Oh, I love that.
Thank you
Sorry if
so
I
much, Mark.
I might have
you're
lost
fine.
track of time there. I'm sorry if I read too long.
You're fine. I love that line. It's good to think about beautiful things
Me
when you're
too.
going to sleep. That was really beautiful.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
So our second reader today is Sonia Meyers. Sonia started her writing career at the Half Moon Bay Review newspaper, contributing articles and reporting on sports. She is currently a middle school science teacher and a 2021 Grosvenor Teacher Fellow with National Geographic and Lindblad Expeditions. She lives on the California coast with her husband and daughter. We Have Something to Say is her first novel. Sonia, the virtual stage is yours.
So much. I'm pretty stoked on this book. This was really fun to make. The cover was something that was inspired by my daughter, but the story was inspired by a class I had about 3 years ago who were very active in wanting to, prevent the school from using single-use plastics and sort of spread that awareness. And from there, I kind of was thinking like, man, what a great story. And over time it evolved. And I read a lot of nonfiction myself, and I teach science, which still baffles my dad because all I ever do is read and write. But I like to teach science. And I was thinking it would be really interesting to put a story of our current changing climate and certain things that are happening in the words for a younger audience to understand and maybe get inspired. So that's where this came from. And I'm going to kind of jump into the middle a little bit and give you a taste of the character, her support from her family, her relationship with her sister, and some of the things that she's grappling with and what she would like to do, sort of her mission in this story. So hope you enjoy it. This chapter is called Do Your Research. When something weighs heavily on your mind, it's hard to push it away. I was trying to move forward with the footage, but Celia kept popping up. I'd sat at my computer for a really long time and probably could have finished already if I wasn't so distracted. The good news was that when each clip uploaded and appeared on the screen, I was more than satisfied with the outcome. I actually captured what it was that I set out to do. The blacktop gyre was loaded with trash the first day, and it was easy to see that specific location accumulated trash every day. I had footage of the pile every morning for 5 days. While I do not want to get ahead of myself, I could see the power of documentation. I heard a knock at my bedroom door. Yeah? Can I come in? It was Dad. Sure, I'm just looking at my footage. Music to my ears, he said. Dad opened the door and stepped inside. He was in his usual blue jeans and cotton collared shirt. He was never dressed up nor dressed down, just casual and always with a smile. Can I check it out? He asked. Of course, I said. I'm looking at the trash piled up at my school. Dad knelt down beside me and made room for himself on the carpet next to me. How come you never sit in a chair? He asked. It's not easy for me to get down here. I like this spot because it's closest to an outlet, which I need, I said, picking up the cord that was plugged into my laptop in the wall. Plus, it's more comfortable on the floor with my back against the wall than slumped over in a chair. Probably better for your posture too, he added. So what are we looking at specifically? I told Dad about the gyre and my need to document it and to prove that trash kept coming back. He nodded, but didn't say anything. What? I asked. Oh, nothing. Obviously, there's something, I said. I don't see much here. A few pieces of trash in each shot, sure, he started. Our class is going to hold an assembly at school, and I'm going to show how the trash accumulates every day. Our hope is that people will understand that their trash ends up somewhere and then eventually to the ocean. Okay, I see, he said. That's very cool. When is the assembly? We haven't set a date. Dad leaned in closer to the laptop. Slowly, he took control of the mouse and was zooming in on an empty bag of chips. He asked, what do you see here? Is this a trick question? Not at all, Dad said. If you take away the noise, what do you see? That's not the point, though. The students need to see that their trash is ending up in the corner of the blacktop. Yes, I understand. Seems to me you have two stories here. One of irresponsible behavior, getting trash in the trash can, and another of making unhealthy choices. Dad, you sound just like Jackie. She generally makes a good point, he said. What if students were made more aware of their eating habits? Well, actually, that kind of came up in class. Not exactly eating habits or eating healthy, but we discussed alternative options for food packaging. That's when the assembly idea came up. Of course, Celia had to embarrass me in front of the class, like she always does. Celia? I could tell Dad was about to describe the Celia he remembered, the one who wore ruffled dresses and two pigtails pulled back so tight her eyes seemed to stretch to her ears. Yes, the same Celia. Embarrass you? Dad asked. How? Or should I say, why? She has to make me feel stupid. She rolls her eyes at me anytime she can, and she actually told me yesterday that she thinks I think I'm better than her. Can you believe that? What did she say to you in class? Dad asked. She said something like, I wanted to lead every project with my film idea, I said. And it wasn't that big of a deal considering she always puts me down. I tried to talk to her after class, but she didn't really want to talk to me and kept saying that since we moved, I became a jerk. I said, well, she didn't say jerk, but you know what I mean. You know, Jenny, her family has been through some hard times lately, said Dad. Really? Like what? Well, Luis, her dad. Dad waited for me to make the connection. Yeah, I remember Luis, I said. Well, he's pretty sick. What? What kind of sick? Well, his kidneys aren't doing so well and he can't work. But he's going to get better, right? It's been almost a year now. Dad looked away from me and towards the door. Luis and my dad had been friends before Jackie or I were born. Luis worked as a mechanic. He could fix anything, was what everyone said. After working all day in the shop, you could still find him under a car or a truck of one of our neighbors. Celia liked fetching him the tool he needed in the moment or holding the lamp for him when he worked into the night. Mom and Dad moved into that neighborhood the day after they were married. Luis was the first one who came over with Celia's mom, Conchita, with flan to welcome them. Conchita made the best flan. Seriously, when you slide the fork down the inside to carve out a bite-sized piece, there were never any air bubbles, just pure cream and caramel sauce dripping from the top. Celia said she was tired of flan at every gathering. I always asked her to grab a slice for me. I couldn't get enough. How come I didn't know about Luis? I asked. I'm pretty sure we discussed it around you, Dad said, looking back at me. Your mother and I tried to visit once a week, after work usually, just to pop in, bring food, stay positive for him. I had no idea. Well, you've been caught up in what's going on in here, said Dad, placing his index finger on my head. Sometimes we could sit at the same table and not hear what anyone is saying when we're lost in thought. That only happens when I'm trying to tune out Jackie, I laughed.
Anyway, keep up the work on this project of yours and let me know how I can help you, he said. He brought one knee to the carpet and then leaned on my shoulder with his left hand to help him up. Don't be an editor. It's a lot of sitting and back pain. But you love it, Dad. Okay, then, at least get a stand-up desk. When Dad left my room, I went back to my footage. Dad had a point. There wasn't much there. It wasn't compelling, which means it wasn't going to be the call to action that we were hoping to garner. It was time. I knew it. I stood up with more ease than Dad and decided to make the walk to Jackie's room. It wasn't going to be easy. She would most likely turn me away, but if I would use my soft eyes with her and talk about the stuff she likes, maybe she'd listen. Knock, knock. Come in, she said. I crept in very slowly, holding the door as a shield in case a shoe came flying in my direction. Hey, Jackie, I said. Oh, it's you, she said, though she gave me the courtesy of looking up. What do you want? Well, I'm working on this project with my class about plastics in the ocean, and I heard that you've been doing things with Jolene's class, and I was wondering if you had any good ideas about how we can get more people at my school interested. Jackie closed up her laptop, scratching her messy bun, turned toward me. I heard about your little project, she said. You did? From who? Who do you think? She said. Mom told me. She also told me you needed help. I never said I needed help. She also said you didn't want my help, but that you would probably come and ask me sooner than later. How embarrassing, I thought. Thanks a lot, Mom. First of all, you don't even know what you're doing, she started. You got all excited when Dad loaned you a camera, and now you think you were going to make the next best documentary, and everyone's going to watch. What you need to understand is your cause. I knew she would be dismissive and rude. This time, though, I took the beating instead of walking away, and I waited for her to speak again. So many people want to fight for something. I think we as humans want to find that kind of passion that fuels us to do greater things. We want to be heard and we want to make change. We see things we don't agree with, and we find a bit of motivation. But when things get tough, we back out. I was listening. The other day, we watched that documentary together. Then you got jazzed up and wanted to save the world from plastics. Let me guess, you want to make your own documentary, but you don't know what to do now that your inspirational fairy dust has worn off. Not exactly, I said. I still want to do the filming and sharing so others can see. I just don't think my footage is that great. And I came to see what I could do to really get people's attention. Attention for what? She asked. For plastic consumption that eventually makes its way to the ocean. I said. Do you even know anything about the ocean? Jackie said. Yeah, like what? I know that most of the Earth's water is salt water and that the Pacific Ocean is the biggest ocean. I said. I know other stuff too. Why don't you do some research about the ocean and come back to me? Then we could talk about getting people's attention. Where do I start? I asked. A Google search for starters, she said. Now go, because I have a paper I'm working on that is due tomorrow and I really need the headspace and time to finish. I turned and walked out like a deflated balloon. She couldn't have been more dismissive. First Eve, now Jackie. Not that I was completely surprised, but she could have at least given me a bit of guidance besides a Google search. Oh, Jenny? Jackie said. I knew she had it in her. She wasn't going to leave me hanging. I quickly turned around and eagerly anticipating what she would impart. Yeah? Close the door when you leave. So much for that. I sat down with my laptop, ready to type ocean into my old friend Google. I looked around my room at all the paraphernalia I had pinned up that had nothing to do with rising sea levels or fossil fuels, and more to do with what was popular and staying up to date on the latest fashion trends. I had the current stickers of Wanderlust stuck onto my full-length mirror, the tapestry of the tarot card, the sun covering half my wall, clothes taking up space on my floor, and the tchotchkes I had Mom purchase every time we stepped into a store. I was definitely not the poster child for climate change mitigation. Jackie was right. I needed to beef up my knowledge. I wasn't going to learn it all from Miss Morgan or from school in general. I had to hold myself accountable for gathering information, or else I was stuck in that waiting game of life, where I stand by and stick around for something or someone to tell me what to do or where to go. I was quickly discovering that no one was really going to lead the way or hold my hand. The door wasn't going to open on its own. I was going to have to turn the handle. First, I needed a key. OCEAN. Images of blue scenes filled the screen almost immediately upon pressing enter. Large barreling waves, underwater ecosystems, colorful sunsets, and aerial views of whitewater shores. Scrolling down, I found the familiar Wikipedia site, ready to give me any and all information if I was willing to dredge through the encyclopedic style writing. National Geographic and National Oceanic and Atmospheric Association, or simply NOAA, came up a few times with educational articles. Then there was the small activist websites about pollution that revealed themselves as I made my way further down the first page of possibilities. What struck my attention was the word literacy. Ocean, like being informed.
Thank you.
That was great.
Bravo.
Wow.
Thank you so much, Sonia. And our final reader for this afternoon is Kellye Abernathy. Kellye is a former business executive, happily transformed into a yoga teacher and practical life skills advocate for trauma survivors. She believes in creatively building unique and supportive communities, one relationship at a time. A graduate of the University of Kansas, she holds a Bachelor of Science degree in secondary English education. She lives in landlocked Plano, Texas, dreaming of her next trip to the sea. The Aquamarine Surfboard is her first novel. Find her at kellyeabernathy.com. Kellye, take it away. Oh, Kellye, I think you're muted.
Oh, wait.
Oh, I think you muted and then, unmuted and then muted again.
The other way. How
There you
about
go. Okay, we can hear you now.
Okay, I'm interestingly, well, anyway, so it goes. My ongoing relationship with technology. First, let me just say I so enjoyed those readings, and I love the lyrical writing and the descriptions that Marc shared. And wow, Sonia, my book also is about the ocean and ocean literacy. All of those things are great passions of mine. My book is magical realism. And so it ebbs and flows between reality and magic, times past and present. It's very much a story of resolving grief. A young 13-year-old girl named Condi Bloom is the main character. But it's also a story about the power of building community in creative ways, as well as exploring the beautiful ocean, which it still blows my mind that the ocean is less than 5% explored. So anyway, I'll begin and just kind of jump in at the beginning. So the Aquamarine Surfboard. The Hollow. People say Windy Hollow is haunted. A lonely place, the tall tower of stone juts out of the sea on the far side of the cove, catching the worst of ocean gales and ragged surf. A crooked finger of shore bridges the tower to a high overlook. There, the ruins of an abandoned mansion and an ancient spa hotel perch side by side, crumbling into the sea. On calm days, and only at low tide, a dune of sand appears in the foaming waters below the hollow, making it easy to wade to the tower's stone stairs. That's when Condi climbs to the top and makes her way over to sit on the orange-red rescue kayak, the one turned upside down, wedged between the two half-moon rocks. For most of the kids in town, going to the top of Windy Hollow is forbidden. But Grand Ella understands why she needs to go there. Remembering is the most important thing, though it's the hardest thing of all. Chapter 1, The Beachlings. A spinning wind day, sand puffs whirl on the beach, threads of chill lace the late summer breeze, and in the outer cove, the biggest waves are crashing. From the terrace of the yellow cottage high on the cliff, Condi watches the surfer kids straggling out to Craggy Point in slick black wetsuits. The surfer kids are the rich kids from the big houses around the cove, with top-of-the-line surfboards and pro-grade wetsuits to shed the cold. But today, with a skittish breeze spinning and white caps breaking higher than usual off Craggy Point, even the best surfers are fighting to get up on their boards. Javid Holmes, a boy in Condi's class, is the first to catch a high roller. Cutting his crimson board into the curl, he skims through the cup of the wave. Condi admires the lightness of his touch, the way he slides into each fold, popping up neatly with the rise. But the ocean is unpredictable, especially today. A sneaker wave snags Javid's board, flipping him sky high. He surfaces and paddles back out to the point to try again. Soon, the other surfer kids stop trying. Clinging to the bellies of their boards, they slide up and down the swells, laughing into the wind. Riding waves is pure joy on top of the water or beneath it. How Condi wishes she was out there. Her dream is to learn to surf, but her grandmother can't afford the cost of a surfboard and wetsuit. The art shop business is slow, and Grandella's second job teaching yoga to the rich resort crowd is not enough. Any extra money is spent on the upkeep of the old yellow cottage overlooking the sea. We live in paradise, Grandella often sighs, but it carries quite a price. The wind changes, throwing a veil of mist over the terrace. Sudden shifting winds signal the coming of fall in the northern Pacific, a time of strange storms and unruly tides. Wiping off her glasses, Condi sighs. Last year, a wild autumn storm cost her everything. Don't think, just breathe. Pressing her toes into the smooth deck of the terrace, she leans into the breeze. Eyes closed, she lifts her chin, setting her breath to the salty thrum of the sea. In her mind's eye, the wood under her feet melts into a polished surfboard. Tall and brave and strong, she rides shining curves of water, bending into each turn, gliding on the gentle waves, pulsing into shore. Never give up on your dreams. Anything is possible, you know. Breathe in, breathe out. In a little while, she opens her eyes and goes to sit at the top of the zigzag stairs leading down to the beach, gazing out to sea. A black speck appears on the horizon line. A surfer kid is popping up out of the water off the shore of Windy Hollow, a place where the waves run wickedly toward a treacherous stand of rocks. Rising out of a curl, the boy slips into a lunge, then comes to standing on his molten black board. Squinting into the sun, Condi searches for clues as to who the new boy might be. Surfing too close to the spear-sharp rocks of the hollow is dangerous. There, the waters churn furiously, sucking unknowing surfers into the jagged teeth of the North Shore. The boy has an unusual stance. In a low crouch, he muscles the board in and out of the waves, avoiding the rocks. Then, in a move Condi's never seen before, he hops and spins in the air, backlit by sparkling wings of spray. Landing smoothly, he rides the board without a single hiccup, sliding into the shallows of the inner cove. Jumping off the board, he shakes water from his onyx hair and glances up at the yellow cottage. She waits for him to paddle back out or go hang with the kids on Craggy Point. But he doesn't do either of those things. Shouldering his board, he walks up the beach toward the soft curve of sand below the yellow cottage. Parking his board at the bottom of the zigzag stairs, he looks up at her. "Hey," he says, grinning. "Coming down?" Surprised, Condi stares at him. All summer long, she's avoided kids in the cove. Squirming, she pushes her glasses higher up on her nose. None of the other surfer kids ever talk to her. To them, she's the sad, quiet girl, the one who doesn't surf. "I can't," she tells him. His face splits in a grin below the fall of jet black hair. "Aw, come on," he says. "I'm new in town. Come for a walk on the beach." A strange butterfly in her chest swoops and then soars skyward. Though this bold, shining boy is probably a big house kid who'll soon learn to ignore her, maybe, just maybe, she could take this chance. Why shouldn't she go join him for a walk on the beach? Okay, she says, standing up and kicking off her sandals. Be right down. When she reaches the bottom of the stairs, she decides to be brave. What's your name? She asks, looking into his turquoise eyes. Trustin, he says. What's yours? Condi, she answers quietly. She likes his name. Names are important things. They carry an identity all their own. Short for Condoleezza. He nods, smiling at her. Like sea and sky. Unexpected tears spin into her eyes. She shakes her head and starts to tell him. Then she stops. This cute new boy doesn't know about Mama and Papa, and the last thing she wants is for him to feel sorry for her. He doesn't need to know that Condoleezza means sweetness in musical terms, and that Papa's favorite language was the language of music. Embarrassed, she brushes away the tears. Squaring her shoulders, she tosses back her curls and forces a smile. Sea and sky, she tells him firmly. You've gotten it exactly right. Which way should we walk, he asks, looking around at the wide expanse of the cove. To the south, the long gray slab of rock called Craggy Point stretches out into the sea, a great launching pad for surfers, while the high beach road leads up through the groves of eucalyptus and beach pine, past the big houses with high decks and grand views, until it reaches the town of Dippitas Beach, sleepily resting on the folded arms of the hillside and overlooking the cove. There's a place we can watch the surfers, she says, pointing to the tall rock tower rising out of the sea on the rough northern shore. People call it Windy Hollow. Let's go, he tells her. His wetsuit blazes with sun diamonds, lighting up the sweet blue-green of his eyes. His answer gives her all the courage she needs. She guides him toward the far side of the cove, the side where the sea is wild, hoping desperately that Grand Ella isn't looking out the window of the yellow cottage. After all, it's been a long time since she's made a new friend her own age. She isn't going to miss this chance. This boy likes her, and he isn't asking awkward questions, at least not so far. They fall into an easy beach rhythm, picking their way across the sharp scree of the isolated northern shore. With the waves crashing, it's hard to talk. Silently, they step across long, slippery rocks scattered across the beach like dominoes, flecked with dots of spray. A circular wind whips up a froth of sand, tangling Condi's hair in the frames of her glasses. Together, they walk the remaining water line until they reach the peninsula of the hollow. The wind is fierce now, the sea at the base of the tower churning viciously around the jagged spears of rocks. Beyond the tower, on the crest of the hill, the ruins of a decaying mansion and spa hotel shiver in the wind. Nervously, she squints up at the sun. It is later than she thought. When they left the yellow cottage, the sun seemed so much higher in the sky. This cute boy's made her careless. It's not like her to lose track of the tides. He follows her gaze. Sure you want to climb? With the wind twirling and the waves crashing, she hesitates. Unlike the calm of the inner cove, the wind is powerful here, the tide strange, this sea impossible to predict. They'll have to wade through a nasty undertow to get to the stone stairs leading to the top of the tower. The stairs are slick and steep. I don't know, she murmurs. A sunburst of light breaks over the beach, blinding her for an instant. When she opens her eyes, the churn around the jagged rocks is softening to ripples of teal. The familiar sand dune she knows so well peeks up out of the water, just as it does at low tide. Smiling, she shyly glances over at him. Let's do it, she says. He smiles. They step into the water and wade through the ankle-deep waves, crossing the shallows to climb up the winding stone stairs, now drying in the sun. When they reach the high ledge, she leads him over to the orange-red rescue kayak turned upside down, wedged between the two half-moon rocks.
Very nice.
Thank you so much, Kellye. So we have about 10 minutes for a quick audience Q&A. Thank you all three for reading from those selections. I think there's like so much to talk about, and I'm enticed by all of the selections you chose. I'm like, I have to know what happens next, even though I know what happens next. But I'll give a few moments for anyone if they want to type questions in the chat, or if you guys have questions for each other. But I definitely have a question for all three of you to start off. And I wanted to know, since all of you, these books are in one way or another kind of for a middle grade audience. And so I was wondering what drew each of you to writing for that age group in particular. Do you feel like writing for middle grade readers allows you to tell stories in a way that you wouldn't get to if you're writing for a different age group? Or I'd just love to hear more about that.
Well, I'll jump in since I've been talking already. I grew up moving around, so I was constantly moving. And so I didn't have a hometown, and I was kind of constantly the new girl. And it was books for this age group that changed my life. They were my best friends. They were the source of comfort when maybe I didn't have a lot of other things except my family. So it's just, I love all genres of books, but this particular age group is just, for me, it's just profoundly important to write and have good books for that group.
Yeah, I totally agree. I like reading was the biggest part of my life when I was that age group too. So I totally get that. Sonia or Marc, do you want to jump in?
Yeah,
Sure.
I think it's two things. One is that you feel that your imagination can be a little more unbridled when you know it's young people that are reading it. You know, my book would have been difficult for some older readers because they would have thought, oh my gosh, I don't know if I like talking animals and all of that type of thing. And I think also it's a chance to honor what was most dear and sacred to you when you were a child. And when I'm writing Setting in the Adirondacks, I just had a love for the wild animals that were up there, and I just had to write a book about it. And when you think about it, it would be very hard to write that book for an adult audience about these animals that you feel you're really communicating with, that they understand you and you talk to them. I mean, we all talk to our dogs and cats and domestic animals. I take it a step further. I talk to all the wild animals I run into too. And I've done that since I was a kid. So in order to recapture that magic that I felt in being in a wild place, and I think we're all to some extent writing about wildness and the sanctity of wildness and the need to preserve it. And we're all struck by things like climate change. And I hear it in the other two books. And so I think that's what it is. It has to do with returning to what was sacred to you as a child, and also finding a genre where you really can be as imaginative as you like to be. And everything is possible. Everything is possible.
I love that, Marc. That's really special. And I think that's exactly how I feel as well. And it is special. The books, and I've had the opportunity to actually taught like a lot of elementary school as well. And that the middle grade books are so much fun and kids devour them. So it's fun to continue to write, because I know personally that there are so many kids that like to read them, you know, and they just fly through them because they're getting to the point where they can read chapter books, you know, and so it's exciting to read a thick book, but also one that has like sort of a playful story.
and it's such a, impressionable age as well.
Mhm.
There's so many things that we can write about that can, like change your life, or be that company or whatever it is. And I know that personally, after teaching science and then, thinking about the wild places and wild animals and the beauty of nature, kind of hoping to spark that in younger students, not
Yeah.
just parks in which they like to play in, but the idea of like the nature around them and wanting to preserve that. And that was kind of my inspiration to write this story. So
I
and it
wish
is
I had had you as, I wish I had had you as a teacher. I really do.
that's what I always say. I'm like, God, we need to be the teachers that we really want,
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, I think that I totally resonate with all of those things just as a reader. And having, like I said, to you, Kelly, just, being that younger reader and knowing how voraciously I was reading books. So I love that. We have a question in the chat from Cami, and this is another one for all three of you. What is a favorite book of yours from your own childhood, and how did those books of your past influence how you approached writing your own stories? Maybe Mark, if you wanted to kick this one off.
Back to Marc. I absolutely loved a book called The Wind in the Willows, which was by an English writer named Kenneth Grahame, and it had a Mr. Toad, and it had all of the animals were the main characters in the story, and it somehow has remained very vivid after all these years. I mean, there are a lot of children's stories that I love like that. For some reason, Wind in the Willows, and I think what Wind in the Willows did for me when I was young, when I read it, is it told me that you could read a story that was very, that had comic aspects to it and charming aspects to it, but still had some depth to it. I really think that children can take a little bit of darkness in some of their stories. And I think, when you think of something like Charlotte's Web, well, Charlotte dies before the end of the story. And something like Stuart Little is headed off to uncertainty. We don't really have this sweet little ending at the end of Stuart Little. And I think the great children's writers are the ones who understand that, yeah, there's a little bit of darkness in this book, but kids can take that. They can understand that. They can internalize that. And it's one of the things that gives the book an extra dimension. And, you play it off against humor and things like that to make the book enjoyable, of course. But there's always a little bit of gravity in a good children's book, I think, too.
I would say Matilda was my absolute favorite. I really, honestly, if I think back to that age, anything by Roald Dahl was so much fun to read. All the stories were really silly and weird. And then when my daughter became that age, it was so much fun to read them over again and do voices and whatnot. Very imaginative, very wild and weird, and easy to get lost. And especially Matilda. I mean, the idea that this little girl just loved to read and could read all day, I was like, well, there's the dream. So she's doing it at 5. That was really inspiring for me to have stories that were so easy to follow and sort of whimsical and weird, but not weird in a mysterious way, like weird in a way that like could actually happen, but you didn't know that person. It's fun for me.
Yeah. For me, I'm glad I went last because there's so many, but I think I would probably pick Madeleine L'Engle's Wrinkle in Time and Wind in the Door, Swiftly Tilting Planet, all of her stuff, because I love the way she blends poetry, history, science, physics. She just was able to bring it all together. So I find that very inspiring.
Definitely. I was
If I could name just one more, could I name just one more book?
Oh, sure.
Mine
Go
was
ahead.
from the 19th century, so I feel like I'm going too far back with mine. But Tuck Everlasting was, I think, is a great book. I really do think it's a wonderful book. And when I was writing my book, I really had to, I've taught literature to college students, so I'm teaching 19th century Hawthorne, Thoreau, Melville, people like that. So I really had to educate myself on books and read up on books that were aimed at younger people. And I thought Talk Everlasting was a fabulous book. And it really influenced the way I wrote my book.
Mhm.
And it keeps you
Yeah,
thinking.
definitely.
I mean, I think about that story all the time, you know, reimagining if I were to live forever, if I wanted,
Yes,
I would want,
yes.
yeah.
That was the amazing part of it. It was so deep on that level.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think all of those, again, I mean, you guys were just vibing on the same level, I feel like.
Right.
So this is really great, this like synergy. I was just gonna say, I was just reminiscing about A Wrinkle in Time with my roommate. Love it. Just, I wish I could read it for the first time again.
I know.
And then we just have one more question to round this out. Kind of going off of what you talked about, Mark, and kids can handle, it's not just an adult thing to have to be able to handle darker themes, like anyone can grapple with those. So for all three of you, how did you balance the humor and the fun and the playfulness of your stories with the more serious or somber issues in the narratives? Did that balance come naturally to you, or did you have to work at it, a lot during the editing process?
Oh, that's such a good question. What first pops into my head is thank goodness for my wonderful critique group because those are tough things to write. There's some tough themes in my book, and it is hard to find to strike the right combination of things. And so I guess I would just say I needed a lot of feedback from fellow writer friends, especially in those parts.
Right.
I think I tried to create a rhythm within the story moving. If I had a scene in the story that was particularly, well, let's say dark or getting to a deep emotional place, I counterbalanced. That was the time where I tried to swing the action in the opposite way soon after that, so that there was a fairly good rhythm between the two. I mean, I've got some really, things about death in my story, and things about a boy recovering from trauma and everything. But I have a lot of whimsical creatures also in the story that I introduce from time to time. I actually thought that the book seemed a little too dark when I first did it, so I actually came up with an otter named Chivas and a snow goose named Florel, who have this ongoing irritating. They're totally irritated by each other, but they somehow hold together. And I brought them into the story just because I thought I needed to lighten it up a bit. And actually, it turns out that there's more to them than seems to be they move the action forward also. But I just knew at that point of the book, boy, this is going to be a very somber book. So I've got to get a little bit of characters in there that are just sort of chatting back and forth and insulting each other and everything else, things like, things that would just turn it in a slightly different direction. So inserting characters sometimes, and luckily, because it's for younger people, they can be animal characters, so that's the way I did it. I intentionally had to add 2 new characters, and I knew that about the middle of the book.
Mhm.
Right.
That was something that was very like a huge balancing act, because I was taking like topics of climate change and environmental justice and like Latinx communities and broken families and all this stuff, and I was putting it into this story for middle grade readers, and I was like, this is going to be tough. I feel very fortunate that I've worked with those ages and that I was really familiar with so many different middle grade books. But I think that having a lot of dialogue really helped, and kind of I want to say like that shallow sort of superficial dialogue at times, you know, when you're younger and you're really kind of concerned with what's right in front of you as opposed to like big picture or the concept of other people. That is kind of helpful because it brings in sort of the personality of someone that age. But it was definitely a balancing act. I thought about it the whole time and I wondered if it should be a young adult or if I should just botch the whole thing. But it was work to balance it. And I asked some previous students to read it. So I was asking the actual age group to read it as some of my reviewers. That was helpful as well, but definitely a balancing act.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, for sure. Well, that kind of brings us to the end of our event this afternoon. So I just want to say again, it was so great to hear all three of you read and to talk about your writing processes and everything, you know, you just discussed and kind of bouncing off each other and all that. So thank you so much to Marc, Sonia, and Kellye for your words and your brains and your generosity today. And thank you to everyone tuning in to, you know, be here with us to celebrate these fabulous authors.
Hi, Cammie.
So
Good to see you. It was an honor reading with these two. I think they both are wonderful authors and they really have many books ahead of them.
definitely.
And you're wonderful educators too. And I'm wonderful. That's great to see. It was just wonderful reading with you.
Thank you.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And don't forget that you can order Tamarac Summers, We Have Something to Say, and the Aquamarine Surfboard from the links in the chat. Please also consider checking out atmospherepress.com to browse our new and forthcoming releases, to sign up for our email newsletter, or to submit a book manuscript of your own. Feel free to submit your work to books@atmospherepress.com and let us know that you attended today's event. We look forward to hearing from all of you, and that's it. Have a safe and peaceful close to your weekend, everyone.
Thanks. Take care, everybody.
Bye. It was
Bye.
wonderful. Take care.